Okay, so let's talk about the process of making Thierry Condor's So Close album. The process of making that record was fairly easy, to be honest with you. I mean, we had a couple of months before we actually started to record, we had like a pre-roll of meetings and thinking about what songs we could do. Since this is mainly a cover record, it's almost like a following up of the previous record, stuff like that we released like 3 years ago. And I remember we had a huge list of songs back then, like 3 years ago, and we had an even bigger list this time, you know. I mean, there's so many great tunes from that West Coast era. You kind of want to cover them all, right? Anyway, so we had that list from like 3 years ago with all the songs we didn't do on stuff like that. And some of those songs ended up on the new list, of course. And we started probably with about 15 songs from that list, and added at least another 20 to 25 onto the new list. So you can imagine it was a big hassle to just make decisions on the material we're going to record. You know, it's also based on Terry's voice, of course, because he has a very distinctive and special voice. Not every song would sound good with Terry on. So we really had to find the right perfect songs for the vibe that suits Terry's voice. I mean, that was our first goal before we even thought about going into the studio and making demos. So we obviously had to, you know, shrink the list down to like 15 songs in order to make it album compatible. Otherwise, we would have done like a double CD or anything like that. So anyway, we knew we got to have only a certain amount of time to produce that record. So we ended up like with 11 songs on that list. But that list, you know, it's funny. I'm still hammering on that list. But, you know, the thing is, throughout the production, even halfway into the production, we just changed the list around. And some songs got kicked out on the way. And one night we were working in the studio, I think it was like 11 o'clock. And then our good friend Nick Heizmann from the label NiRo Music, he called us and said, "Hey, guys, I just found that song. I kind of rediscovered it. And I think it's perfect for Terry. And maybe we should consider to record this and maybe dump another one." And the song he was talking about was Let's Go Up. You know, but a version I've never heard before. I knew the song from Dennis Edwards from an older record, but I've never heard the Diana Ross version. So that was pretty cool. So I knew the song and I was familiar with it. And immediately I thought, okay, this is cool for Terry. This works well with his voice. And it's not an overly covered song, meaning that, you know, not too many people made a remake of that song. So I think we passed on No One Emotion from George Benson, and we recorded Let's Go Up instead. Yeah, I know it's a long story about that song list and about the song choice, but to be honest with you, this was the hardest part to make that record, to know what to record and what not to record. So anyway, so the actual process of making this record with Terry is pretty simple and very straightforward. So I would go in and I'd program for each song a very simple drum programming and maybe one piano pass, maybe a bass, sometimes not even a bass. And that for each song, of course. And then Terry would come in and he would lay down like a guide vocal, like a really rough ghost vocal, which is, allows us to hear the feel of the song and the key and tempo and if in general, if it's the right track for Terry, you know, you hear immediately with just the piano and drums, not even a bass sometimes, if the feel is right and if his voice is right, even for the song. When Terry comes in and sings one pass and it feels great and he shines already, then we look at each other and say, wow, this is a good song for you. And sometimes, of course, we just let go or pass on a song because it doesn't feel right or it's stumbling every 16 bars or whatever. I mean, with a record like this, we had the luxury to just say no to a song because it doesn't work. We can just say, no, I mean, I think it doesn't work for Terry's voice. Let's try another one, you know. And with NiRo, they always had an open ear for our changes or things they might not work in the studio. Music is always king, and if it doesn't feel right, the song is not going to end up on the record. Okay, so the next step would be Thierry and we finished all the pilot vocals for each song, and I'd start to arrange every song around Thierry's vocal. Meaning, I would probably come up with some drum programmings first, even if it's considered to be played live by JR later or somebody else. I just make sure I have a proper rhythm programming just for me to play along to and have more fun, and also maybe for a guitar player to come in and record to a decent groove. So I record all the basics like Rhodes, bass, pats, and some strings already. And maybe I would mock up some guitar parts that will be replaced later by a real guitar player. If I hear any ideas for guitars, I usually put them down like right away with the sample patch and give the guitar player that comes in later to perform a little better idea for what I'm hearing in the song. And they can maybe come up with their own ideas. And usually we end up with a combination between the two of us. So in the case of Thierry's record, we didn't end up using any real bass. All you're hearing is either a Moog patch, or for the more real-sounding basses, I mainly used Trilogy. Okay, so after the basics are all done, and they already sound a little bit like a record, with the pads and some guitars, and maybe JR is already on there. And not the whole kitchen sink thing, of course. I mean, still some ear candy missing, some bells and some overdubs. But it's definitely time for Thierry to come in, and we're recording a final vocal. Okay, that can go from like a 2-hour session to a 6-hour, 7-hour session, sometimes split in 2 days, of course, because it depends on the song, how difficult it is, if he has a great day or not. And we're not comping vocals on those records. We just record them until they're great. Thierry's an amazing singer. He can nail really great takes, believe me. And usually it's the first, second, and third take that is a great take. And everything after that can be bonus, and it's good to have, But we always strive for, we're leaving that studio tonight, and we have a vocal. Well, in terms of background vocals on that record, it was very simple and straightforward. We had 2 people. That was Thierry Condor and Sabina Stokes. She's an absolutely incredible vocalist. She has ears like an elephant. Well, not in the physical sense, of course, but in a musical sense. She has extremely good ears. She's super fast and has a beautiful tone. And Thierry and her, it's magic to me. I always use them for background vocals on anything, not only on a West Coast record, but I use them on pop and everything, Well, and Sabina and I, we go way back, like back to my childhood. I met her when she was singing my brother Chris's first band. I think I must have been like 14, 15 years old or something. And now, 30 years later, we're still working together. How cool is that? Well, let's say all the lead vocals are done, all the backgrounds are done. We had some additional sax players and soloists come in and do their parts. We might as well put some horns on a couple of tunes, and that's usually an affair of like an afternoon or a few hours in the morning or something. Then I would go back into the studio by myself and take a few days just to go through each song and see if there's anything missing. Maybe I can color a song up a little bit by adding some more keyboards, maybe a mini Moog somewhere or some bells and strings. And usually it's that time where I put some real percussion on the tracks as well. So I always have a mic set up where I can just spontaneously grab a shaker and play it on the track, because I truly feel like a live played shaker is like oxygen for a song, because, it starts to breathe, like even if it's like just a programmed drums. But as soon as you put a live shaker on it, it's like day and night groove-wise. So I always try to integrate that in my productions. Okay, so the only thing that's kind of left for the production to complete is the final mixes. And what I usually do is I just fine-tune what I already got. So I'm working entirely in the box. That means I'm mixing throughout making the record, like every day a little bit, right? So some songs needed some major tweaks, of course, and some other songs like Just Call, that one was like literally done in 30 minutes. I remember I was putting some last keyboards on it, and I already liked the way it sounded. And as far as I remember, I probably didn't even write the vocal on that one. I think it was just set perfectly on a certain level, and it felt great to me throughout the song, so I didn't really have to touch the fader on that vocal. That song is very linear, so sometimes you get away with that. Not always, of course. Ballads usually have to write vocals like crazy and reverbs and all that stuff. But anyway, the mix process for that record was pretty fast and painless. So all in all, I'd say like within 5 days, we had all our tweaks done and we were ready for mastering. Okay, I hope this gave you a little insight of the making of Thierry Condor. So close. album, which was a lot of fun to do. And at this point, I just want to say thank you to everybody that was involved in the making of that record. And thank you so much, NiRo Music, for their endless support. Nick and Robin Heizmann, you did an awesome job here. Thank you. And all the players, of course, that contributed so beautifully on that record. Thanks, Thierry, for your great patience with me, and you're a true Cadillac, man.